Well, hello, good evening. Whoa. Is there something going on tonight? Is there something we all want to talk about? We want to hear about? It's really good to see a packed house for tonight's event. I had a funny feeling that it would be very, very busy. Hopefully you guys were spreading conservative Christian values in the parking lot as you were frustrated with other cars. I appreciate your patience and your love for each other. My name is Michael Wydell. I'm the permanent MC for the APOLOGIA, kind of by choice and mostly through marriage, so it's really great to be here. I was just counting. If you go all the way back to February 2021, which was our first Apologia ever, we've had 26 Apologias in the last 3 years. Pretty incredible. I'm always blown away every time I ask this question that there are people that this is their first session. So if you just raise your hand, who here is this your first Apologia ever? Oh, this is amazing. Look at all these people. Welcome. This is great. Now, dare I ask the other question? You know I've been here for 26 sessions. How many of you have been here for every Apologia session? Raise your hand. Okay, a few people. Yes, awesome. Really good to see you guys. It's nuts to think that in February 2021, this program was created by Pastor Alec and my wife, his daughter, Catherine, just trying to create a venue or a forum for all of us who are Christians and conservatives to understand what in the world was going on in the world. And really this forum has been a place where we could educate ourselves on understanding where culture intersects with biblical values. What do we make of it? We've brought in incredible subject matter experts. The very first session with, God bless them, was with 2 local Congress people, all the way through people like Dennis Prager, and Seth Dillon, and you probably regret that you didn't come to the 3 times that Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense nominee. Unbelievable. If you didn't know, you can go onto Westgate Chapel's YouTube. There's a whole Apologia playlist or like list of videos, and if you want to see all of the times Pete's been on here, he's been phenomenal. We texted him to wish him congratulations. He hasn't texted back, so that says a whole lot about our friendship. I was estimating he probably had at least 500 texts, probably 1,000. Let's talk through the flow here for this program. So if this is your first time, really, really simple. 2-hour program. First hour is like a fireside chat between Pastor Alec and Kayleigh McEnany. During that time, you guys actually determine and control the second hour, which will be questions that you guys submit through this text number. So text your questions to 844-773-0530. Don't worry about taking a picture. This will come up all throughout the first hour. But as you hear Pastor Alec and Kayleigh talk about various issues from the future of our country, where it's currently at, what she's hopeful for, and all of those types of things, please make sure to send your question in. I would be remiss, of course, if I didn't talk about how we support this program. You're going to put this slide up early, but this program is totally driven and supported by you guys. This is not an official part of the Westgate Chapel budget, nor is it an officially budgeted program and staff program. It's just a couple of us that keep this thing going. I would ask you to prayerfully consider donating your time, treasures, and talents, mostly your treasures, to keep supporting this program, because I don't want this to be the last time I get to see you guys, and I don't think you guys want to either. So please submit any sort of tithing. $1 makes a difference to westgatechapel.com. There are little black boxes outside of each door, so you can put cash in an envelope, or you can text to give as well. There's a couple of booths. I wanted to talk about a couple of booths. I just wanted to give a shout out to FPIW and Ginny Chapman. They've been faithful contributors and supporters the whole time through these 3 years. I don't know if you guys saw the data. Every state in the union moved a little bit to the right, except for this old state. So we need to pray for our local Congress. In fact, the next legislative session is January 13th through the 23rd. What's really cool is Ginny and FPIW have set up a day to pray for our Congress people. all day as they start their session. So January 15th, which is a Wednesday, all day there will be a group of believers praying in Olympia for our congressmen and women. So if you're interested in that, please stop by the FPIW booth. Secondly, a longtime supporter also is our local school board supporters. Basically, this is a group that attends the Edmonds, Mount Lake Terrace, and Linwood school board meetings. Small stat. Do you know the average school board meeting has only 5 people in attendance? 5 people are there to voice their opinion on our behalf. So when this lovely group who has a table right outside to my right, when they show up with 5 people, it literally doubles the room and changes the tenor or the energy within the session. So their ask is not that you would come and speak on a microphone. I think most of us, except for me, are nervous about speaking into a microphone. But what they do want is just a simple show of force. All you have to do is just join them, go to the table, sign up for one of the sessions, and just sit with them. Literally, if you just sit with them, and I can find 5 more people, we will double the average attendance at a school board meeting, and the school board will actually understand that the conservative voice cares about what their kids are learning and has a say in what happens. Interesting, talking about having a voice. Next year, please pay attention to the local elections. 2 Edmonds school board positions will be opening up for election for Edmonds. We've had Nick Jenkins from Westgate Chapel run before. If you feel that could be the Holy Spirit talking to you right now. If you feel a little tug, that's what we call the Holy Spirit. Please stop by the table and talk to them about an opportunity there. Okay. Oh, lastly, hopefully you saw the big table down the center, which is Kayleigh's book table. This is her latest book. It's $18. I have about 200 copies. That sounds like a lot, but I promise you by the end of the intermission, they will all be sold. So if you're interested in her book, please stop by the table, $18. Okay, that's enough of hearing from me, but I've really enjoyed being in front of you guys again. Let's talk about Kayleigh. Kayleigh McEnany, of course, is the former White House secretary. In my opinion, she was the best press secretary ever. She can hear you backstage, by the way, so that's awesome. She's the current co-host of Outnumbered on the Fox News channel. Prior to serving in the White House, she served as the national press secretary for the Trump campaign and was formerly the national spokesperson for the RNC. Before joining the RNC, Kayleigh actually worked as a political commentator on CNN. I know some of you know that. Kayleigh is a graduate of Harvard Law School, Georgetown University School of Foreign Services with a degree in international politics. That sounds a lot like my education. She's also studied politics and international relations at Oxford. Me too. Can you please give a warm welcome for Kayleigh and Pastor Alec?
Well, I thought we'd be meeting under different circumstances than these. When Catherine booked Kayleigh almost a year ago now, and we talked about the timing of having her here after the election, we considered that she'd be able to come and give us a post-mortem about why we lost. But my goodness me, we are so thrilled that you are back and under these circumstances.
Thank you.
You were on camera. Somebody asked me back behind the platform whether I watched the election. I would like to have taken some sleeping pills and just slept through, just wake me up when it's all over. I can't handle the pressure. But I understand you were on camera. What were some of the feelings? What was going on inside of you as you watched the elections?
Yeah, what a night that was, right? Yes, thank you, Jesus. How many of you stayed up until 2 a.m.? Was it? Wow. Wow. Well, I was up until beyond that on Fox News, and we were in the newsroom and watching these results come in, and you're just nervous, right? And I see Indiana start to come in, and you start to read these tea leaves, and you see the suburbs of Indiana. Oh, you know, are his numbers where they should be? And then you start to worry a bit. And then I look down at Florida, my home state, and I was blown away. When I looked at Miami-Dade County, a county that no Republican has won as a presidential candidate. DeSantis won it, but no Republican presidential candidate has won since 1988, but then Trump did. And then I looked at my home county, Hillsborough County, Tampa, Florida. So this isn't just a suburb, this is almost a metro area. Donald Trump became the first person to win Hillsborough County as a Republican since 2008. And then I look in the center of the state at Osceola County, and this has a huge Puerto Rican population, and he wins Osceola County. And I look at this, and I think to myself, this is going to be a landslide. And however tired you were as the clock approached 2 a.m., boy, you got some adrenaline as you watched a landslide take place. It was quite exciting.
Yeah. Unpack what you think happened in the country.
I mean, a lot of common sense. It's funny. It's true. President Trump had this line, and I thought it was really well said when he gave his speech that evening. And he said something to the effect of, we are reuniting around a common core of common sense. And I think that explains exactly what happened around the country. I mean, the numbers really tell a story. President Trump had the largest popular vote, raw number count, of any Republican president ever. So that was raw votes. He won all 7 swing states, so not a few, all 7. And nearly every state or jurisdiction in the country trended right. In fact, New Jersey trended right by 11. Trump came within 5 points of winning New Jersey. I mean, who would have thought? California went right by 12 points, New York by 11 points, Illinois by 9 points. It's incredible. A lot of people woke up and said, what's happening in our schools? No, thank you. What's happening in our economy? No, thank you. What's happening at our border? No, thank you. And I think it was a reunification around common sense.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe, we have a neighbor of ours that had Harris signs up, and I thought, really, I didn't want to, they know I'm a pastor, so I can't be too vocal in the neighborhood, but I wanted to say, seriously, do you want 4 more years of, it did not make sense to me.
Yeah.
So what shifts in demographics surprised you? Were there any shifts in the demographics of the vote?
I mean, all of them. When you look, this is a totally remade Republican Party. It's a working class party now. It is a diverse party. It is an exciting party of new faces and new coalitions. I mean, here are the numbers from our Fox News voter analysis. So Latinos went 13 points more towards Trump, 13 points. Black Americans, 15 points towards Trump. White suburban women, he won outright. Remember, this was the demographic that was going to win it for Kamala. He outright won that demographic. But here's the most exciting thing. 18 to 29-year-olds shifted right by 19%. And so according to NBC, and I'm sure they loved reporting this, Trump had the largest shift among young voters of any Republican dating back to 2008. And in fact, young women, remember, they were going to be the cure-all for Kamala. They were going to be the defining vote alongside the suburban women. They shifted towards Trump by 9 points. So Gen Z, I know people love to criticize the younger generation. This is a wise generation. They've woken up, and it's really exciting to see.
Yeah. Are there any factors that you think contributed to waking that generation up?
That's a good question. I mean, I think what they saw on their college campuses, I really do. I think most Americans are good-hearted, loving people. And when these young people go to their campuses and they see the transgender movement being pushed in a way that's very vocal, when, people putting up pronouns, for example, they feel these cancel culture elements happening. They see it maybe in their classrooms. I think that's where that movement started. And then I do believe that the vast anti-Semitism that poured out across campuses, most of our sons and daughters looked at that and said, no, thank you. That is not a movement I want to be a part of.
The polls seem to tell a different story going in, right? That's why I just wanted to wake up when it was all over. Yeah. The polls did not look very promising. Can you explain what's going on with the polls?
So the polls actually got better. So I went back and looked, and they underestimated Trump in the first two cycles. So in 2016 and in 2020, they underestimated Trump by a lot. The polls were better this time. In fact, so the Real Clear Politics average nationally had Harris up by 0.1%, 0.1. Trump ended up pulling off a victory of +2, so that's within the margin of error. The polls had Trump winning 5 of 7 swing states. He actually won all 7, so they weren't vastly off, but I knew something was going on when pollsters swore to us, oh, we fixed the polls, we're not missing the silent Trump voter. But Nate Cohn of the New York Times, he wrote this was the days before the election. Across the final polls, white Democrats were 16% likelier to respond than white Republicans. That's a larger disparity than earlier polls this year. And he went on to say there's no reason to believe pollsters fixed what went wrong in 2020. So he admitted that days before the election that the polls were not fixed. And while they didn't vastly underestimate Trump, there was still that silent Trump voter there. So I think they got a little faith and confidence back, except for maybe Ann Seltzer in Iowa, who put out that famous poll, and she announced she's retiring today, but it had nothing to do with that poll. So.
You've watched, I'm sure, like we all have, some of the analysis that the Democrats have done about what happened. What kinds of things have you heard? What are your observations?
Yes, so I brought some of that for you. I love reading these articles like Axios and New York Times because it's so fun for me, having been in press and communications, to see in the aftermath of a loss like this, you have people leaking against one another. You have the Harris team, speaking poorly of the Biden team and the Pelosi team, and it's really fun to read what they say in the press, especially when you're not on the receiving end of it in an administration. So a Harris aide told the Washington Post, Joe Biden is reason 1, 2, and 3 we lost. Shortly after that, a Biden staffer told Axios, how did you spend $1 billion and not win? What the bleep? I'll let you imagine what that expletive is. And then Nancy Pelosi told the New York Times, had President Biden gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president stepped aside, there would be an open primary. What all this reminds me of is the long litany of Hillary excuses. Do you remember there used to be like scrolls we would do of like 40 things she blamed, the Russians, the media. So that's what's happening right now. And that list, I'm keeping tabs because it's getting longer and longer by the day, and none of them quite hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So as the campaign developed, what were some of the endorsements that you think made the biggest impact?
Yeah, so I was just telling you backstage, Pastor, I don't often tout the New York Times as having like a great piece or masterpiece that we should all read. However, there was a really good New York Times piece that came out last week, and they went and found these undecided voters, and they asked them, when was the moment you decided, the very moment that you said, aha, this is who I'm voting for? And it's fascinating because I don't know a lot of undecided voters. I know Trump voters, I know Kamala voters, but I don't know that person that, after 8 years doesn't have an opinion on Trump, or after 4 years doesn't have an opinion on Biden. But I love and I'm fascinated by that voter. So here's what they found in the New York Times. Joseph, who is a 24-year-old from South Carolina, says, I voted Trump. I made the decision after he appeared on Joe Rogan. He seemed more normal than the other side. So Jack, who is 22 from New York, said, the Joe Rogan interview was huge for me. Trump enthusiastically said yes to a 3-hour open, honest conversation with Joe Rogan, who was a former Bernie bro. I think it's very telling about which candidate is authentic and which is not. But the hilarious part is the one undecided voter who said, I decided who I was voting for after I listened to Kamala Harris on the Call Her Daddy podcast, and I decided I must vote for Trump after that. and yes, and she spent 6 digits building that set, 6 digits, let that sink in. So it's really interesting, but I do think these podcasters, and it was really brilliant actually. Susie Wiles, who was the campaign manager, went to a guy named Alex Brusewitz, who was a young influencer on the Trump campaign, working in social media, and said, come up with a list of podcasts that President Trump can go on. So he comes up with the list, and he runs up to Trump on the golf course, and Trump looks at the list, and the first thing he says is, have you spoken to Barron about this? His son Barron. And so this guy, Alex, goes to Barron, they coordinate this strategy, and as it turned out, I mean, it was the most brilliant strategy in the world. Ignore CNN and MSNBC, and go on these hugely popular podcasts and reach young people. It made all the difference.
What role do you think Elon Musk played?
So it was interesting. I read in an article somewhere that the campaign said that he was really moving young men towards President Trump. And I could see that. You know, this is this conglomerate of influencers. So Joe Rogan, RFK, Elon Musk, and like I'm a traditional conservative, so you know those aren't necessarily the voices that would compel maybe someone like me who's a social conservative, and those are the issues I look to. But that group, I mean, it's a different. As one of my colleagues said, and I think this is a smart way to put it, they are subscribers to curiosity. Like if you're someone who listens to Joe Rogan's podcast or follows Elon Musk, you do so because you're very curious about the world. And I think those voices brought in a whole new group of people. You know, Trump always had social conservatives like me. We were always going to vote for, the president who overturned Roe. But those individuals, Elon, Joe Rogan, and that group brought in a whole new group of voters that really tipped the election.
Do you feel like Trump had the lead through the whole campaign, or was there a momentum shift that happened at some point in there?
I think there were several. I mean, when Joe Biden used the term garbage to describe half the country, that was a definite turning point. In fact, one of those undecided voters cited that as a moment. But if I have to think about the moment where the campaign was won, I think to Butler, Pennsylvania. And that it was... Thank God he was looking out for the president. That was definitely divine what happened, I have no doubt. Watching that, it's one of those moments you never forget where you were. I mean, I was getting ready to pack up and go to the RNC, and I was having kind of a last meal with my family around the dinner table, and I literally had my husband grilled hamburgers, and I was about to take like my first bite, last meal before going to the RNC, and then I get calls from my mom screaming, "Are you watching?" And it's a moment you don't forget where you were. Yeah. And then you see the president yell, "Fight, fight, fight." And I think what happened in that moment was so important. And it wasn't just the divine nature of him looking at a graph he never looked at and literally a bullet narrowly missing him. It was that moment that people saw, wait, this is a fighter. This is someone who, if he's going to fight like this in a rally, he's going to fight for me. He's going to fight to bring down grocery costs. He's going to fight to protect my daughters from lawlessness crossing the southern border. He's going to fight for me. And I think that moment, he really became unstoppable.
Yeah. He's not really a politician. So there's no real reason for him, when you think about it, to put himself and his family through what they've been through, other than down deep inside, he loves this country and wants to see conservative values. I mean, I don't see any other motivation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in fact, you can go dig up this old clip of him on the Oprah Winfrey show from, I think it was like the 80s. And she asked him if he's ever going to run, and he said, I would only do that if it ever got bad enough, and I knew I needed to in order to save the country. And boy, did we get to that place.
Yeah. You amaze me at how prepared you are, but then I shouldn't be amazed because we watched you when you were press secretary. know I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the questions that we've talked about, but I've always been curious, especially watching the current press secretary. I've always been curious about the level of preparation. You obviously have come prepared, knowing the direction we wanted to go, and you've done your homework. Who preps you? How do you get ready? You came out, I remember a couple of times you schooled the CNN reporters, told them you didn't know why you had to do their job for them. We loved that. You know, honestly, one of the things that I love, I don't know if there'll be resources or necessity to keep these apologias going. But one of the things I've absolutely loved about it is the fact that we gather together on a night like tonight, really because we have at heart those biblical values that we believe every society absolutely has to have if it's going to thrive. We're united. We might come from different churches, we might have different perspectives, but we're here because we honestly believe that biblical values in the public marketplace are the only way for us to really thrive and live. And so people like you have, in some of the darkest moments, and I'm not trying to flatter you, people like you in some of the darkest moments have given us a little rays of hope. You know, when we see a Fox reporter that obviously believes in life, believes in the values that are non-negotiable for us. So you've always been a source of encouragement, but particularly when you were in press secretary mode. How did you get ready for that? What kind of people did you have to interface with? What research did you have to do? How did you get ready?
Well, thank you. I'm very humbled by that. So thank you for the kind words. You know, it all goes back to having a mom and a dad that put the worldview in my heart that mattered most, and that was a Christian worldview. And when I went off to these liberal institutions, Harvard, Oxford, I carried that with me. And while those institutions provided a lot of value in preparing for the press secretary role, you can get very lost there if you don't have that center. And that moral center for me is Christ. And that kept me centered. But I will say, you know, during my time at Oxford, that was probably, people say, like, what prepared you to be press secretary? I would say it was my year there. In Oxford, they have what's called a tutorial system. So you write a paper, 10-page paper, and you have to read it out loud to this highly credentialed academic, and they rip you apart. Why would you say that? Defend this. No, that's not accurate. And you can leave in tears. And I can tell you, these professors are a lot tougher than Jim Acosta and John Carl, and they have a lot more facts at their disposal than some of these reporters. So when I went to the press secretary role, I'm a researcher at heart. You know, there are some press secretaries, I would say, where it's talking points, like where are the talking points, what's in the binder, I have to read the talking points. I'm a researcher. I love to read. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that I could call the CDC director, are you kidding me, and ask him for graphs and pore over graphs and learn all of this. I thought it was the neatest thing in the world. I could call the head of NIH, and I'm a nerd. So I would sit there and, you know, with two individuals who are my closest aides, we would work on the binder. I'd go home, I'd stay up till midnight, putting in new data, preparing meticulously for the moment that I would take the podium. We'd sit around this wood-burning fireplace in my office, some nights until 10 p.m., and think about every possible question the press could ask. And sometimes they would never ask that question because they had not thought through these like layers. And we put this binder together, and the reporters actually behind me had a camera, and they would take a picture of the binder. And CNN had this article, Decoding the Mysteries of Kayleigh McEnany's Briefing Binder. And there was no mystery. I mean, the tabs were therapeutics, vaccine, COVID, whatever we were supposed to talk about. But we thought one day we'd change it to like John Carl, Jim Acosta as the tabs, Kaylin Collins, so they knew they weren't on notice. So that was always a regret that we didn't do that. But long story short, a lot of academic preparation, but more importantly than any of that was the spiritual preparation. I was so nervous before my first briefing on May 1st, 2020, and I got a text from my predecessor, Sarah Sanders, and she gave me all this advice, and at the end it said, most importantly, pray. Let God carry you through the tough times and give you strength when you don't have any wisdom. And she sent me her Jesus Calling devotional from exactly 2 years prior, and it said, you're on the path of my choosing. And I knew that was a message that I was meant to hear. And while I was very nervous and had a lot of trepidation, I got on my knees in the West Wing bathroom, said a prayer. We said a prayer together as a team, and when I walked to the podium, I felt a total serenity come over me, like I had stood there my whole life, and it was nothing that I did. It was not the academic preparation in years past. It was because there were millions of Christians and people of faith across the country who prayed for us. So if you were among the people in this room who prayed for our administration, I want to thank you, because I'm a testament to your prayers, and they truly made all the difference. So thank you very much.
When President Trump selected his VP, somewhat of an unknown, JD Vance was to us, what were your thoughts? And as you've tracked JD Vance's career so far as the VP elect, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so my initial thought was, what a lot of people were thinking. Okay, he needs to pick someone to win the suburban woman. Who's that going to be? And you're thinking through, like, who can win suburban women and all of these groups that he won anyway, right? It was a landslide. And then he picks JD Vance, and I sit back and I start to think about it. And I had read Hillbilly Elegy, and I think, wait, this was really brilliant, because this is the American dream. JD Vance is the American dream, and he happens to be incredibly brilliant as well. And to see him on the debate stage do an extraordinary job, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I mean, the way he talked with such empathy on the issue of life. He's pro-life, and he said that, but he came from a place of empathy and understanding, and he just was pitch perfect. And I said, Don Jr., who apparently was behind the pick, I was like, what a brilliant selection. Like, you need to be picking everyone on the Trump team. This was so smart. And it's funny because in that list of undecided voters, the most cited name, and Joe Rogan was second, but the most cited name by these undecided voters was JD Vance. They saw the debate, they saw him, and they said, I got to get on board with this team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And he really handled the press magnificently.
Oh, yes.
He did. Yeah.
Very class act. I want to see him do a lot of briefings.
Yeah. So we were talking back before coming out here that some of the things that President Trump said early in his first term, I remember, and I was pro Trump. In fact, I had a speaking engagement in Hong Kong during the election, and we were sitting in a church service in Hong Kong waiting for me to go up and speak. Rita was sitting next to me, and she said, Catherine just texted me and said Trump won. I said, she's lying. But we learned very quickly, right? When he said that his campaign had been spied on, I don't know what you thought, but I thought, oh, no, come on. That's a little fanciful, but sure enough, right? And then he was the first one to coin the phrase fake news, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, yes.
So how's the fake news reacted to the election? What kinds of things have you watched?
Meltdowns. And I have a report from a driver in D.C. that the reporters who were picked up from Kamala's party that evening were not very happy. And it wasn't just because they were there late and she never showed up. They were actually quite sad that, the election had gone in the other direction. I think it's a sad indictment of the country, some of the things we've heard from the press. They just never learned their lesson. I mean, the New York Times put out an apology note in the wake of 2016 saying they would do better. And none of the press has done better. In fact, Axios says that the press has hit its lowest point of trust ever in recorded history. The press is the least trusted civic or political institution in existence. And you can see it in the ratings. MSNBC has nosedives, CNN has nosedived, Fox has gone up because we report truth. But it really is sad. And again, I'm sorry to keep going back to the undecided voters. It really is a fascinating read. But what was miraculous to me, truly miraculous, is the number of these undecided voters who cited the mainstream media as the moment they decided. One voter, a young man, said, I decided I had to vote for Trump because I can't trust the media. Another person said, I decided to vote for Trump after the media was going nuts about the Madison Square Garden rally. That's incredible that these voters thought for themselves, saw through what was an avalanche, an echo chamber from the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC. They tried to make this Madison Square Garden rally the big October surprise. And the fact that voters cut through that, that's a really encouraging thing. And hopefully one day the press wakes up. It's not a good business model to report things people don't want to hear and to have no one trust you, but we'll see. Maybe they'll wake up this time.
Yeah. How do you think they will transition from Trump being Hitler? How are they going to transition from that to his presidency? Do you think they'll make that transition, or?
It will be very telling which reporters they choose to put in the briefing room. And that's wild. Like when you say that, we say it so casually, right? But it's not a casual thing. Like he was called a fascist, the worst part of world history. An American nominee of a political party was analogized to, and the press bought it hook, line, and sinker and ran with it. I mean, it's really malpractice, if not very dangerous. We saw the 2 assassination attempts and the kind of hate that, this whips up. So it's very dangerous. But what we'll be telling is the reporters they put in the briefing room. Does CNN choose to put in the briefing room a Jim Acosta or a Caitlin Collins, which in my mind were very partisan during their tenures? Or do they choose to put a serious reporter? There's one reporter who comes to mind, and he came up to me one day on a tarmac, and he said, Kayleigh, I'm one of the old school reporters, and please don't say this to any of my colleagues, but I'm someone who just wants to report the truth. And I looked around the briefing room, and I could name the reporters. You wouldn't know their names, Mario Parker, Steve Holland. You don't know their names because they were not there for self-aggrandizement. They were there to just ask really good questions, and their questions were often the hardest because they were thought-out policy questions. So if you start seeing good reporters like that put in the room, maybe they're going to change, but if you start seeing these TV attention-seeking reporters who want to write books, that means it's the same old CNN and NBC and ABC.
Who makes those choices?
The newsroom. So the head, the top honcho of the network will make that decision.
As to who represents that network.
Yes, exactly, who the White House correspondent is. So be on the lookout for those names and do your research.
So can we jump to the cabinet? We've got a little bit of time left during the first hour. Talk to us about your thoughts concerning some of his appointments.
So I think the most exciting cabinet picks I've seen are the foreign policy ones. I'm a fan of Marco Rubio being a Floridian. I think that's an excellent choice for Secretary of State. Mike Waltz, Waltz, you go, not that Waltz. Oh my gosh, that wouldn't be a good cabinet pick. Mike Waltz, to have a Green Beret as the National Security Advisor, Elise Stefanik at the United Nations. These are top picks. And what I'm thrilled about with these picks is there was kind of a battle in the movement between kind of the more populist leaning foreign policy and kind of traditional conservative policy. And what I know when these battles are playing out within the party on the various issues, the thing I know is I know the person at the top, and the person at the top is someone who's pro-life. He overturned Roe v. Wade with his Supreme Court picks. The person at the top is someone who understands alliances, who knows peace through strength, who knows America first is not America alone, who knows better than anyone how to make sure no new wars start on his watch. 4 years, no new wars. It's incredible. So I'm thrilled about the foreign policy picks in particular. And I think this is a cabinet in general just of disruptors and people who want to make change, not do things the old status quo way. And I hope Ben Carson gets a spot. I'm seeing rumors he could get Surgeon General. I really hope to see that happen.
Yeah. Who would have thought that a few months ago in our previous APOLOGIA, we would have had the Secretary of Defense sitting here?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Amazing. I mean, he was my colleague that would order me breakfast in the morning when I was on the couch with him and Will filling in on the weekend. And now he's going to run the Pentagon. But in all seriousness, I just want to, tout Pete Hegseth for a moment. People say, oh, he was a TV host. No, I mean, he served our country valiantly for a very long time. And then, yes, did television as well. Nothing wrong with that. But this man, so October 7th happened, and they called me in and asked if I could host the weekend show. So I said yes, and what a tragic day in history and world history. And I walk in October 8th, 4:58 a.m., and there's Pete Hegseth at a map of the Middle East at 4:58 a.m., right before the show starts, pointing out all the countries in the Middle East, naming them, which actors mattered in the country, and geopolitically how they interplayed with other countries. This is someone who knows the world, who knows foreign policy, and he doesn't get the credit he should get from the media, but he's a very talented person and would do a great job at the Pentagon.
I think one of the factors in the election that was the most moving for all of us was the issue of the southern border. Talk to us about Trump's nomination for the border czar.
Yeah, so.
And he's keeping that name, right?
Yeah, Tom Homan, whoa. Talk about someone who wants to get down to business. And Stephen Miller, my former colleague, who is, I'm sure, somewhere in a room drafting up executive orders, like ready to go on day one. You know, Tom Homan said something really interesting on Friday, because he has this really tough exterior, right? And, you know, if you're someone maybe who's a Democrat, you're like, oh, he's very tough on the border. Like, why is he being so tough? He said on Friday, the reason I'm tough is because you don't know the atrocities I've seen. And Friday on Outnumbered, we covered the Lake and Riley trial, and I could barely keep myself from crying as I watched her mom, or they didn't put the cameras there, but I read through our pool report that the mom had to leave the room. Her 27 family members in the room were all in tears. This young woman fought for her life for 18 minutes. And they can tell that based on the watch she had around her wrist, that something happened, and for 18 minutes, the fight transpired and she lost her life. I believe it was at 9:28 a.m. Totally preventable. This individual crossed the southern border, and she's not the only one. Rachel Morin, Jocelyn Nangari, a young girl who was just walking to a convenience store. I mean, Rachel Morin, who I just mentioned, a mother of 5. These are totally preventable. And I have a heart for, you know, the young children who show up at the border. I absolutely do. And I have a heart for our daughters, our mothers in this country who should still be here with us. So when you see Tom Homan and the toughness he has, it comes because of the atrocities that he has seen. And I hope we do not have another young girl who goes for a run in this country and loses her life to an individual who should never have been here.
Yeah. Which nominees do you think will have the biggest uphill battle to get confirmation?
So, I mean, if you listen to the media, they say, you know, Matt Gaetz will have an uphill battle. They say RFK potentially, or Tulsi Gabbard. Those are the ones, and I say this because these are the ones the Democrats are targeting. The Democrats will pick a handful and they'll zero in, and judging by what you see being reported, those are the targets they have selected. So they'll answer some hard questions from senators. I think, you know, RFK, for instance, he will answer some tough questions on the pro-life issue, and we should have our pro-life senators ask those questions. But in general, I think, you know, you're gonna have this cabinet, they're going to be asked tough questions, but I've seen Republican senators very open to the idea of trying to give Trump the picks he has chosen. He has been proven right so far. He has a mandate to lead. Senators have a right to ask the questions and to provide advice and consent. Those are the 3 I would watch. That'll be tough confirmation hearings, but it is normal for maybe 1 or 2 not to get through in any given administration, so we'll see. But it's been a great group that he's picked, and again, what I would say, as someone who's a pro-life voter myself and cares deeply about the issue, you know, when I look at a selection like RFK at HHS, where I do have solace is I know the man at the top, I've had conversations with him, many, and I know that he is a pro-life president. And I know that there's not going to be a secretary running around rogue, engaging in decision-making that would be adverse to what the commander-in-chief is making.
He certainly made more advances for the pro-life cause than any other president has.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Which policies or issues would you like to see become priority in the first 100 days of Trump's presidency?
So I think this is my prediction. I think day one, you're going to see an executive order unleashing American drilling. It's going to be the opposite of shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. Yep. I think on day one, you're going to see executive actions putting in place what President Trump had that had secured our border. Joe Biden undid 84 executive actions within his 100 days regarding the border. So I think Trump's going to put those in place. But with Congress, I think and I hope the first thing we see is an economic package. You know, my dad runs a roofing and contracting company, and he said his employees were thrilled when they heard no tax on overtime. He said that was a big, big thing. So I really hope, you know, Trump has made us the working class party economically. So I want to see a working class economic agenda go through Congress. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, interest rate limits on credit cards, the extension of the Trump tax cuts, a working class economic policy I think you'll see as the priority number one.
Any chance that we'll actually see whole departments closed down, like Department of Education?
I mean, if you believe Elon, yes. Yeah. I love the enthusiasm of this room. You guys are one of the best audience in the hats. I mean, this is amazing. If you believe Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, which I mean, I wouldn't bet against those guys. Elon Musk has sent rockets to space. They plan on doing some trimming, and Department of Education is one of them. And interestingly, the former head of Department of Education during Trump's time, Betsy DeVos, came out and said, this should be eliminated. I ran the department and it should be eliminated. And even, it went in place in 1979. Reagan, in his State of the Union in 1982, advocated for closing down the Department of Education. So this is not a novel idea. It's a common sense one. Block grant that money back to the states and let states decide, although I don't know if I want your state deciding education. Might have to take that back. Maybe you guys in this room.
Yeah, you had to bring that up, didn't you?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. What do you think will happen with the existing lawsuits that Trump is facing and has faced for the last couple of years?
So they are definitely going to go away. The federal ones, certainly. Jack Smith has already indicated he's going to step aside. That's all going to wind down. I, for the life of me, cannot get over what is happening in New York. And, you know, I'm in New York, so in fairness, this is a blue state too. So I'm as sad as you guys are at some of the decisions being made. And we have to lay claim in New York to lawfare because Alvin Bragg decided to bring this zombie case. And that's where you saw the Trump conviction. And when you look at what the judge did there, Judge Merchan, this should have been simple, open and closed. This should have been dismissed last week. What are we waiting on here? Even the New York Times, I'm sure they hated reporting this, did a study and found that never before in history has New York state law been used to bring a federal election charge. And that's what they did. So they had this unprecedented case, should be closed, should have been closed last week. And instead, Merchan said, we're going to punt it a week and decide in a week. So no, this needs to be closed. Lawfare is gone. 75 million people said we're done with this. And the judge should respect that and close this and not have this hanging over the head of a duly elected president for sentencing 4 years from now. I mean, I'm hopeful he'll close the case, but we'll see.
Yeah. Do you think there's any way, any kind of policies that could be enacted that would shut the option of lawfare down for either party in the future?
You know, sadly, I think lawfare is here to stay if parties want to pursue it. And I say that because it's hard to predict, you know, down the road what any given fact pattern you could avert. But I'm hopeful that Democrats maybe learned their lesson because lawfare backfired. I believe that President Trump, when voters saw him riding to that Fulton County jail, and you had CNN talking about how bad the jail smells and he's going to be treated like a common criminal, I don't think the average American liked that. I think most people said this is too much, this is too far. It definitely backfired, so I'm hopeful that maybe Democrats have decided we're going to do away with this. But I think the best thing Trump could do is have his Department of Justice be a shining example, exactly as it was for the 4 years he was there. You know, he said, everyone wanted me to prosecute Hillary Clinton. People were shouting, lock her up. And I said, no, that is not what would be best for the country. It wouldn't be right for the country to do this. We need to unify as a country and move forward. He was a shining example for 4 years of how a Justice Department should look. And then you had 4 years of Biden where we throw pro-life elderly people in jail, a woman named Paulette Harlow, who has a disability and she's rotting away in a jail because she prayed outside a clinic. Are you kidding me? What Trump could do is undo that, pardon people like Paulette Harlow, and move forward and have his DOJ do what it did for 4 years, which is be a Department of Justice.
This is not a question we've given you, so if I'm out of line, just punt on this one, okay?
Okay, I'm good at dodging and pivoting.
But we've been told that President Biden will not pardon Hunter. Do you think President Trump should?
That's a great question. And it's funny, I suggested this on air recently, that it would be interesting if Trump chose to do that. I don't know what him and President Biden talked about. They were in there for almost 2 hours talking. And I'll just say this, Joe Biden looked really happy when he was there. Joe Biden wore a red suit. I mean, they were grinning from ear to ear. Like, it's funny, there was this picture last night of Trump and Elon Musk, and I forget who else was there, maybe Mike Johnson and Don Jr., and they're all eating McDonald's on Air Force One, and RFK was there too. Someone posted a meme of Joe Biden, like, from the back being like, this is what happens when, like, the kid tries to go be friends with the cool kids, and it's funny. I think Joe wants to come into this circle, so we'll see. But look, I don't know what was discussed. I think it would be a really nice gesture, and I thought I was speaking from left field when I suggested it. But then I read that Trump actually suggested this himself during one of these podcasts, so he may do it. And what a look of being magnanimous right out of the gate. So I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah. Speaking of Biden sneaking into Air Force One or Trump Force One. Some of you will remember when Inslee forbade us from meeting in each other's homes for Thanksgiving, remember? And we all ended up at Catherine's living room. She has a big living room with kind of gabled windows, and unbeknownst to us, she'd snuck outside and stuck a picture of Inslee on the outside of the window.
That's great.
All right, talk to us about your thoughts about John Thune replacing Mitch McConnell.
That's great. You were hilarious, by the way. So are you, Catherine. There was definitely a pick that was seen as more friendly to the Trump agenda, Rick Scott from Florida. There were a lot of people saying, we want Rick Scott. And the Senate is its own creature. They take a lot of pride in being independent, and they have these secret ballots. I think these ballots should be open. Rick Scott would probably be the majority leader right now if these were open ballots. But John Thune and Trump met with each of the candidates, and he met with John Thune just before the election, I believe, and it was with him and his wife at Mar-a-Lago, and everyone kind of made amends, and there was some acrimony in the relationship from back to 2016, but they mended fences, and here's where I'm very confident, is John Thune is coming into a plan that has already been put in place. I know House Speaker Mike Johnson fairly well, and he will often talk to me about what his plan is, and he said to me, he loves sports analogies, we have a playbook ready to go. We have the players in place. We have a well-oiled machine. This will not be 2016 where they were scrambling and they decided to try to repeal Obamacare, and you remember one senator put his thumb down and then that failed. This will not be that. They have a well-oiled playbook. You have Speaker Johnson there with Trump, who's come up with this, and I think John Thune is going to fold into this well-executed playbook. So I think it will be a fine relationship.
That's encouraging.
Yep.
That's encouraging. Do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of the first assassination attempt?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think a big question there is who's going to be the next director of Secret Service. I've heard people say Dan Bongino is in the mix. A lot of Dan Bongino. I've seen people say one of Trump's detailees, one of the individuals who jumped on top of him and saved his life, and his detail was very much separate from some of the failures that happened. They were not even in the loop as to there being any sort of threat. So I know he loves his detail and someone on his detail is being considered. So we'll see. That is not something that we can just let go by, because it wasn't just Butler, of course. It was at the Trump golf course. I mean, these are two near assassination attempts, and there needs to be a real accounting. And the idea that the Biden administration, Kimberly Cheadle, who was not even fired. She was allowed to resign, and I'm sure she's gonna have some great job somewhere. Her deputy gets elevated to the head of the Secret Service. Since when do we elevate deputies who oversaw a failed mission twice? Since when do we do that? So I think we will. I think President Trump's going to demand it. And look, no matter which party you're in, every single person who signs up to try to be president needs to be protected when they're the nominee of a party, and that needs to be straightened out.
Yeah, exactly. One last question for a few moments that we have before break. Our governor governor-elect, along with Newsom, have promised to use every power at their disposal to hinder the agenda coming from Washington, D.C., from President Trump. How effective do you think they'll be in blocking Trump's initiatives?
Not very. I mean, not very. It's amazing. You lose in a landslide victory for Trump, and you are on the receiving end of that loss. And I listened, and I gave, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to wait and hear Kamala Harris's speech. Maybe she will be unifying. And some people said, oh, she was so gracious, but I counted. I was on the Fox set as she was speaking, and I was creating this little tally. I was like, she's saying fight a lot. Fight. She said fight 20 times in her speech. Then Gwen Waltz and whatever Walls, Tim Walls, they both said fight. Kamala Harris actually created a fight fund, literally a fight fund. What are you fighting against? The American people who elected Trump in Atlanta? Is that who you're fighting against? I think the only person who was kind of reflective was Joe Biden. He's the only Democrat I saw that did not use the word fight. And Murphy in New Jersey, the governor there, actually said he wanted to fight to the death. Fight to the death. And that was so disappointing to me, because I was in the Oval Office in April of 2020, and you had Governor Murphy sitting here, Democrat, and you had President Trump amid COVID-19, and Trump gave him all these supplies, swabs, face masks, everything. Governor Murphy praised him nonstop. Governor Murphy said, we put politics aside to do what's best for the country. This is a man I can work with. And now you want to fight to the death? Like, why are we ginning people up? You've worked with this individual before. You know everything's going to be just fine. I don't think fight should be the word, but that's the word they've chosen. I don't think it will be successful. They need to do some deep self-reflection at this point.
Yeah. Amen. Take a break. We'll be back in 15 minutes. We'll take your questions.
And we're back. Oh, come on, everybody. If you can hear my voice, can you just start clapping? This is an old MC trick. It makes all the people in the lobby come running in because they think Kayleigh's here, and then they see me and they're like, oh, I still have more time. So I'm glad you're back. What an incredible first hour. When I grow up, I want to be Kayleigh McEnany, that's for sure. I know I made a joke about the education. I happen to go to the Oxford of the Pacific Northwest, University of Washington. Go Dogs. Yeah, there's a lot of Cougs here too. Go Cougs. I don't really mean that. It's so cool to see so many people that are here for their first time. Obviously, you heard about it somehow, whether you saw our social media advertising or a friend told you. I want you guys to stay up to date with the latest and greatest, and if this program is to continue into next year, I just want to take a second to recognize, like, when this thing started, we this moment, what we're celebrating now with Kayleigh is what we've prayed for. It's what we had 26 sessions to build into. And so it's just awesome to like be in this moment now, which is really, really cool. So if you do want to attend more of these, and we do go into 2025, you need to go to apologiaforum.com, just scan the QR code, be added to the mailing list. Here's my promise. I happen to know the person who sends out these emails. We will not send you anything other than information about upcoming Apologia forums. Your name and likeness will never be used. You'll never be sent to another mailing list. This is simply to just know what's coming up, who's coming, what the date is. Because as you can see, when we have great guests, lines start to pile up and you're gonna wanna know exactly that. Lastly, I wanted to just plug one more time. I have no shame in asking for your financial support of this program. You have to ask yourself, and I mean this really, really seriously, ask yourself, how much would you pay to see Kayleigh McEnany in Edmonds, Washington at Westgate Chapel? I mean, this is a program that's free to the public. It's free to you guys. It's free to our community to spread the good news and for us to be informed. And I just want to say one more time, whether it's online or whether it's in one of the envelopes on the back of your seats or whether you give through text, your support literally lets this program continue. And it would be the worst thing for me not to be able to see you guys again because we just didn't have the funds to do Apologia Forum. Maybe you don't care about seeing me. I know you want to see who's ever next, but my point is we really, really appreciate your support. God bless you, sir. I think we do, or if that was a ma'am, I'm so sorry. If you haven't bought a book, I think we're down to like the last 20 or so books, so appreciate all of your support. As my wife and I were reflecting on the last 3 years worth of programs, she put together this really great video just to celebrate what we've done in 2024, which is incredible to look back and reflect. So we'll watch a video and then Pastor Alec and Kayleigh will come back out.
Their record is despicable. Left is bad. Liberal is naive. Liberals are not bad. They're weak. And the weak allow the bad to prosper. That's the tragedy in America is not the left. The tragedy in America is the liberal. The liberal shares no values with the left except anti-right. And that is enough for them to vote for people with whom they differ on everything. It used to be they didn't believe in moral truth. The left doesn't believe in any truth.
Yeah, there's also the element that comes into play where you have people who have abandoned rationality on purpose. We've seen a lot of that, people who are literally looking you in the face and saying that 2 and 2 make 5 and they want you to agree with them, When people have abandoned rationality altogether and they're saying irrational things and they're exulting in their irrationality, sometimes reasoning with them isn't even an option. It's like trying to give medicine to a dead man, what's the point? But you can ridicule their terrible ideas and expose the foolishness for what it is so that it isn't taken seriously.
By the way, don't count on any president, and I don't mean that. Don't count on any government official. If you're counting on them, we're in a tough spot. Turn to your fellow Christian believers. Turn to the people in your church. Turn to the people in your community, in your life. If we're going to save America, it is going to happen that way, not this way.
And I think what we've seen in the last few years has been God's mercy, his wake-up call to say, do you see what will happen? Do you see what can happen? This is just the beginning. But you need to get a taste of evil so that you remember that it exists, and this is your job to pray and fight against it. Not to pretend like that's somebody else's job or to pretend like, well, it's not really that evil. But I believe the Lord has allowed it to wake up those who might still wake up and to say, okay, if this continues, it's over. And it is essentially over. But I believe that if God's people would stand up and do what we can do now, we might avert the disaster we deserve?
Listen, I mean, I pray for revival in this country. I think it's the only, I really, you can yell on TV all day long, you can vote, you can mobilize people all you want, but we are not gonna vote our way out of this problem. We're gonna get our way out of this problem on our knees. You go through the whole Bible this year in a chronological way, and it's amazing. I'm in September 15th, and I'm still in the Old Testament. We're in the prophets. But it's amazing. The same sentiment of nations exists today. Like when we have turned our back on God, and as a result, he has given us unto ourselves, which is our sinful and corrupt nature, and things have devolved into chaos, into sin. And at each individual church, each pastor needs to take their stand with their kids, with their grandkids, in their congregation, and say, we're gonna be a part of fighting to take back this nation.
Can you join me in giving a raucous applause for Kayleigh, McEnany, and Pastor Alec?
I don't know how many of you are Westgate Chapel people, but that's how I get greeted every Sunday in this place. It's crazy, man, really. You know, just quickly before we jump into the marvelous questions you've submitted, I have to just say that as thrilled as I am with the results of this last election, and honestly, the reprieve that God has given us from the descent into chaos and darkness. With as grateful as I am, I honestly believe that these 4 years are a window of opportunity that God has given Christians in this nation. And if the Church of Jesus will get on its knees and call on the Lord in repentance, because honestly, the problems in our nation are the result of the church ceasing to be salt and light. We're the cause. So I know we're blessed in these Apologia sessions to have people from many, many different churches represented, and we welcome you here. We're actually doing this as just to be a rallying point in the Pacific Northwest. But if you have influence in your local church, please encourage your pastor, encourage your congregation. Let's get on our knees and ask God in his mercy, would he revive his church? Would he set his church on fire once again? And then this nation will have a chance beyond the next 4 years. All right. Some of the questions that were sent in off camera, how did you get along with the other news people from CNN or MSNBC?
Yeah, your questions were excellent, by the way. I was reading through them. Some of them I'm like, well, that's really hard. I would have to really do a lot of research on that one. So some smart people in this room. Look, on cable news, people fight on air, and that's what happens. And there are some people who carry that off air and take their politics very personally, which always shocks me, because I have friends on the left, and there's nothing wrong. They think differently. I think the way they think is wrong, but it doesn't stop me from being their friend, because my politics is not my religion. My religion is Jesus Christ, and that comes before any political identity. But when you meet people who have that same perspective, it tends to be a good relationship. Van Jones comes to mind. He is very far left. I disagree with pretty much every single thing that he says, but he truly is a brother in Christ. And when I first got the job as press secretary, when I was really nervous making my way to the White House, my dad texted me and he said, maybe you're here for such a time as this, which is a reference to the book of Esther. And Van Jones, believe it or not, 2 or 3 weeks into the job, texts me, maybe you're here for such a time as this. And it's not just something I was meant to hear, but it's no accident that I heard it twice. I think it was God saying to me, you're in the place I need you to be, and it's a message he sends to all of us. But I say that to say, there are people who think differently. I don't know how he can be a Democrat. However, he's a brother in Christ, and it's nice when you're able to forge those relationships off air.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the most awe-inspiring or can't believe this happened to me moment for you as an individual, being around so many well-known, powerful people in the world?
Yes, there are a lot, but one that comes to mind was a Saturday evening when I was boarding Marine One. And Marine One, most of you probably know, is the helicopter on the White House lawn, and you load on, and it's the president and a few aides, a very small group. And we're taking off, we're going to a rally, I think it was in North Carolina, and the president said to me, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, oh no, this is the guy from The Apprentice. This might not be good. And I said, "Mr. President, I'm your press secretary." He goes, no, I know that, but you have a child, you have a husband, it's Saturday night, you're here on Marine One, you're going with me to a rally. And he looks, I said, "Well, you know, my husband might play baseball tonight." At the time he was in the major leagues. And he goes, "Wait, so you're telling me your husband might pitch tonight and you're here coming to a Trump rally?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he turns around and goes, "The Trump show's the greatest show on earth," or something like that. And we take off on Marine One and we go to Air Force One. And all night he's asking me, "Is your husband pitching yet? Is your husband pitching?" "No, sir, no, sir." He asked me as we're landing, same question. And then we're finally landing on Marine One and the blades of grass are like blowing back. And he says, "Okay, here's what I want you to do. Go to the private dining room off the Oval Office, put your feet up, turn on the TV and watch your husband pitch," which I never would have done. But it was very kind of him to suggest. And then he said to me, "And know this, next weekend I want you to go be with your family, be with your daughter. Nothing's more important than that." So to see that empathy from him was really amazing.
Do you have a life Bible verse that you hold dear?
I think, you know, there are a few. I love Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's what I tweeted out before my first briefing. Ecclesiastes 3:11. God makes all things beautiful in its time. So no matter what you're going through, he can turn what is a horrible situation into something beautiful. So there are a few, but I would say those are two of my tops.
Regarding the college students' vote, do you think Charlie Kirk's presence on the campus has had an effect engaging dialogue with students?
Definitely. Look, it's always worrisome when you try something new in an election. And what I mean by that is you kind of want to go into an election saying, "I have this tried and true, well-oiled machine, and we're going to deploy it for round 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And when Trump kind of outsourced the ground game out of the RNC, at first it's like, okay, I hope this is going to work. Like, Charlie Kirk is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. But does he know the ground game? Yes, he knew the ground game. And he knew how to deploy young people. And he knew how to do this on college campuses. And not just in Arizona, his home state, but in states across the nation. So it was an experiment, which it was like, oh my goodness, I hope this experiment goes well. But it went exceedingly well. And I think that's the credit to having a CEO at the top. He's not just going to go with the same old model. He's going to try new, innovative things. Someone like Elon Musk too, Vivek, having this new energy. It's not the same old stale political types who are like, we got to do it this way. It's new energy, and it worked. Yeah.
Is it too early to tell how the church did in getting out to vote? In previous elections, Christians, I think almost 50% of Christians or more did not participate in an election.
That is so disappointing. I remember seeing a study that it was 50 million plus Christians that would not vote. I mean, that is so difficult to think about, because if you've read the Bible quite clearly points in one direction on the issue of life. I mean, it does. And you think that would compel Christians to go to the polls. I haven't looked specifically at the number of Christians. I do want to follow up on that, because I was dismayed to see that stat ahead of the election. But I think it's so important that our pastors realize, like, we need to have a voice in culture. We need to have a voice in politics, because these are all downstream from our faith. And, I'm not saying pastors need to go vote for this person or that person, but my pastor at my church laid out biblical principles that were a Christian voting guide. We should all have a Christian voting guide in mind that is based on biblical principles when we go to the polls. And I hope more pastors do that going forward. It's pivotal, because if we lose politics and culture, we'll never
Lost
lose
it.
the church,
Yeah.
but we see how government policy could impede on the church.
Yes.
You know that well with Inslee and COVID.
Yes, yeah. Do you think Joe Biden voted for Trump?
So it's fun to debate this in your mind, right? I'm sure he would say he voted for Kamala Harris and did, what he did. But I just look at data points. That's all I have, right? All I have are data points. The big smile after he met with Trump. Jill Biden wore red on election day when she went to vote. Biden kept making these decisions that really stomped on Kamala's agenda. Like, she was about to go out in Michigan and take the stage, and he marches out to the podium and says, no one was more influential in my agenda than Kamala Harris. Well, she did not want that to be said. Then she gives her big closing argument on the White House ellipse, and he makes the garbage comment that comes out right after. I mean, there's just a lot of the MAGA hat. I mean, there's a lot of things. So I don't know, although I think he might have just written in Joe Biden. That's gonna be my guess. I stole that one from my husband. I was like, I've got to use that one.
Well, we know Jimmy Carter voted for Harris.
Yes.
So, what do you think about the celebrities threatening to leave the country?
I mean, they always threaten this, but they never leave. They always stay. And they're gonna make a ton of money in the Trump years, right? I mean, the market's going to be good, inflation's going to come down, everyone's going to be better off, everyone getting tax cuts. So I don't think any of them will actually leave. But I will say this, if they truly have a desire to leave, I saw an advertisement today from a cruise company that's offering a 4-year cruise, 4-year cruise. So everyone can load on the cruise and the celebrities can cry together,
Is there anything that worries you about the next few months of transition before Biden leaves?
That's a fantastic question. Because yes, look, I am all for unity. I want the country to unify. I want us to come together. I want, as Trump said, success to unify us. I want everyone to be better off. But I said, despite wanting that deep in my heart, I wanted President Trump to go into this meeting with Joe Biden with eyes wide open, because he went in and met with Obama for 90 minutes. And I won't forget what happened on the backside of that meeting. Mere weeks later, President Obama said to the intelligence community, maybe we shouldn't share intelligence with Trump because there's this Russia thing brewing. In the Oval Office, it was mentioned, Michael Flynn specifically was mentioned, and they warned President Trump about Michael Flynn. And then we all know what happened when, the FBI, the deputy FBI director, stormed in and really targeted him. And Flynn, that ended up all coming out fine, but he had to sell his house in the process. So my point is, there are all kinds of antics at play that we did not see going on in 2016 as President Trump was coming in. Not to mention, when he finally did get in, what happened 1 month after President Trump took office? His phone calls with the president of Mexico and the leader of Australia leaked to the press. So it wasn't just Obama undermining him on his way in, it was these career government officials in place that were actively undermining him every step of the way. So I'd say let's unify and be magnanimous, but do so with our eyes open, that there's still this huge cadre of civil servants under Trump, not all of whom want him to succeed.
There were 51 national security experts that signed the Russia hoax on the laptop. What do you think needs to happen to them?
I mean, look, it's a travesty. I would make sure that they're nowhere near government. A lot of them are retired, but I think President Trump is walking in with his eyes wide open this time. He knows this. He's been undermined. He's had people buck his orders. This is the people's elected president. And he says he wants to do something. He puts in place a legislative agenda, and then you have people undermining it beneath. The 51 intel officers are an example of what happened during the election. He needs to make sure each of these individuals are pushed outside of government. And there are novel ways you can do that. There's an executive action he took that allowed him to fire some of these individuals who have all these layers of protection. Another idea I saw was take the agencies and move them out of Washington, D.C., the swamp. And it's gonna force people to leave, and you're gonna get new, fresh thinking in places like Montana or the Dakotas or wherever. But move the agencies outside of D.C. and let's get new people in. So that's what I would prioritize.
We have Westgate Chapel right now, while we sit here, has a group of 21 emergency chaplains on the ground in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, working there with some other ministries and helping people. What are your thoughts about some of the FEMA actions that President Trump reported on and then got poo-pooed by the press?
I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified. Look, the storms have been horrible. I'm from Florida, so we've been through hurricanes. Several of my neighbors in Florida, their houses all flooded, and this was not the first time. Some of my neighbors in these, small, just a few 100 square foot old Florida homes, people poured their life savings in from all across the country, Midwest. They all pour their savings into buying these little bungalows. Some of them have flooded 4 times in the year, 4 times in 1 year. And the latest of which was this hurricane. And I know these people. They're my friends and neighbors. Like, I look them in the eye. And, President Trump questions the FEMA response, and he has every right to do that. And by the way, what happened in the Carolinas was way worse than what happened in Florida. This little boy named Micah, who I'll never forget, he was a little 8-year-old boy, was on the roof with his mom and grandparents. And the grandparents were swept away, and little Micah was swept away. And his mom said that his last words were crying out to Jesus. And he said something like, "Jesus, I see you," or Jesus, something that intimated that Jesus was there, and it gave her so much peace. But I tell you this story just to really drive home how bad this hurricane was, and not for just Florida, but the Carolinas. And so when you have a situation like this, people who have lost tons of, the Craig family lost like 10 family members in the Carolinas. So you have human atrocity. And then government comes in, FEMA, and they're supposed to be there to help you. And they're supposed to come to your door. How can we help you apply? And then to learn that there's someone at FEMA who directed them to skip Trump houses? Are you kidding me? Some of these people lost family members. Some of them lost their whole life savings, and you're going to skip their house because of their party identification? I don't think so. And now she's saying this was an agency-wide situation. It was not just her, that there were several others doing this as well. This is a travesty, and there's congressional oversight this week. People need to be held to account on this. Americans lost their lives.
Kind of a lengthy question, Kayleigh, but Trump has taken the GOP platform in a more socially progressive direction compared to the previous platform, such as weakening the pro-life plank and removing traditional marriage plank. How should Christians think about the future of Christian values in the U.S., where it seems that moving away from Christian values is the current direction of the GOP?
As I'm someone who, the reason I ever made it to the podium was because of the issue of life. I remember it in high school being very drawn to the issue because the partial birth abortion debate was playing out. And some of you may remember this. Literally 5 justices on the Supreme Court, supposedly the wisest among us, they're in these black robes and they're so wise and erudite. Well, 5 out of the 9 justices voted to uphold the killing of a full-term baby, not even entirely in the womb. 5 justices. And Justice Scalia said, one day we're going to look back on our jurisprudence here on the issue of life, and it will be beside Korematsu and Dred Scott. Korematsu upheld Japanese internment camps. Dred Scott upheld slavery. 2 of the worst opinions, morally depraved opinions in the history of our country. And Scalia thought with the advent of technology and ultrasound, one day the way we have treated the unborn will be right there beside it. I tell you this because this is a big issue, and I believe Scalia is exactly right on this. And we cannot back down from this issue. We as a party cannot hide from this issue. And President Trump, I think what he was trying to drive home is right now, it is factual that we do not have the votes in the United States Senate for a national abortion ban. We may want one as a church. Look, I think when you look at Europe, we are This is hard to believe, but it's true. I heard Justice Roberts say this, and I didn't believe it, so I had to go fact check it. We are one of 5 countries in the world that allows elective abortion after 15 weeks, one of 5, with North Korea and the People's Republic of China. So Western Europe has federal abortion bans, but somehow in this country, we're still okay with killing children who can feel pain, literally feel pain. They can feel pain at about 15 weeks. So I say all this to say this is an issue. Yeah, we don't have the votes in the Senate right now. That is a fact. But we can't back down from this issue. And when we speak on this issue with compassion, we can win on the issue. We won for the first time against an abortion ban in Florida, in Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And the key to all 3 states were governors who were willing to stand up on the issue. Governor DeSantis was bold on it. You had Pete Ricketts be very bold on the issue of life and explain it compassionately. And that's finally the last point that I'll make. You know, we as Christians in this room, I know we communicate compassionately, but we need our elected leaders to do the same. And the best advice I give to elected officials is a statue I saw out in Michigan. And it's a statue of a woman who had just aborted her baby, and she's holding the hand of Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is holding the baby, and the woman's looking at him so distraught, and he's looking at her with love and compassion. You know, these are women in the hardest, most vulnerable times of their life, making decisions that most of them don't want to make. Most women want to keep their babies. And so we as a party need a national agenda, and I hope Trump will do this, for supporting women during pregnancy. Simple things like the Unborn Child Protection Act, men paying women child support from the moment of conception. If we believe the life is a life, then fathers should pay mothers from the moment of conception. That should happen. So all that to say, we as Christians should not back down from the issue. We must speak on it, and we must do so from a place of compassion and love. And I keep that image in my mind anytime I speak on the issue.
Do you think it was from the perspective of the lawmakers, do you think it was expediency that they chose to soften some of the pro-life planks on the platform?
I think there was a ton of fear, for sure, that, you know, in a post-Roe world, can you win? Because we have lost, as a pro-life movement, every single ballot initiative in every single state post-Roe, every single one. Ohio, for example, became like California. You can have abortion till birth in Ohio now, a red state. This is a hard truth, a hard reality. And so I think there were a lot of legislators, a lot of politicians who looked at the issue with trepidation, but I think you need not do that when you explain it. Polling shows people can get on your side. Nobody wants a baby capable of feeling pain killed in the womb. Nobody wants that when they understand. But the surefire way to lose is to hide from the issue. So I want to see the party lean in more, because in the 3 states we won, you had 3 governors who were leaning in. And when you lean in, you can win.
Thank you. Thank you. What's the anticipation of President Trump bringing new nominees for the Supreme Court in the next 4 years?
Yeah, he might get some appointments there. You know, I think what will be interesting to watch is you do have 2 older justices on the conservative wing, and 2 of our best justices, if not the best, are Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. I believe they're 76 and 74 respectively. So it will be interesting to see if either of them decide, you know, I want to retire during a Trump administration where, you know, I know my successor will be someone who does honor to the seat I once held and show fidelity to the Constitution. So we'll see. I know there was some similar pressure, the flip side of that, on Sotomayor, and some on the left wanted to see her step down so Biden could replace her. But it will be interesting to see. All I know is, thank goodness for Amy Coney Barrett, because all these COVID edicts around the nation, we were losing on all of them. Governor Newsom, who wanted to regulate the number of people who could gather in private prayer in homes. Think about that, like prayer groups, he wanted to stop. That is crazy. We were losing all of these cases on 5-4 basis, and then Amy Coney Barrett gets on the court, and all of a sudden religious freedom begins to win. And that's very important for everyone in this room. Having that conservative Supreme Court, it's your kind of bulwark against a lawless governor. So thank goodness we have it now, and I hope it stays.
Yeah. It seems to us, when listening to the press, that they get language handed to them, and they all use the same phrases like weird, Hitler, fascist, and if one uses it, they all use it. Is that actually happening?
I wonder where they got those words. The DNC? I mean, Yes, it does actually happen, and I think you see them all grab the word. And where did it originate? I mean, that was Tim Walz who said the weird comment, and then every single commentator, I won't call them reporters because they're not commentator and partisan, picked up on it. So without a doubt, they all know the talking points. And trust me, they're not coming from the RNC. They're picking up the ones from the DNC.
It feels like the only hope we have and the best thing for this state is for Trump to stick 2 new U.S. attorneys in Washington to go after the corruption. Is this something you think he's going to do?
Look, I think he's personally felt lawfare. And this week, I believe it was, he appointed someone new, or at least announced who he wants to lead SDNY, which is the biggest, U.S. attorney post in the country. And SDNY, ironically, a team that once looked at Trump, and now he's getting to pick the person who will be there. Yes, I think when I talk about the civil servants undermining, DOJ is one of those places that I hope this Doge looks at the DOJ. Elon's Doge looks at the DOJ, and these career attorneys that aren't interested in justice but in injustice are pushed aside.
When we had Mike Pompeo, he said that there would be tens of thousands of people in the DOJ that needed to be eliminated.
Yeah, without it, I mean, when you're targeting the pro-life community, and when the head of the department, Attorney General Merrick Garland, was asked in a congressional hearing by Mike Lee, how is it that you've prosecuted, I forget the number, 54 pro-life individuals, and yet the majority of attacks are coming from the pro-choice movement against churches, and you've only prosecuted 1 person? He said, well, the pro-life attacks, which there's no pro-life attacks, there's prayer outside of clinics. The pro-life prayer comes during the daylight when we can see the people, and the pro-choice people attack at night, as if you can't prosecute someone and you can't find crime in the night. That was his answer. It's crazy. So yes, those people need to go.
Yeah. Trump has taken a bold stand on reevaluating the tax code, obviously resonated with everyone. What do you anticipate in being able to accomplish with regards to changes in taxation?
Yeah, so the Trump tax cuts are set to expire, and this was one of the biggest misunderstandings. When you look at the IRS data, you see that every single income bracket got a Trump tax cut. Every single one got a Trump tax cut. It was like 17 to 18% if you made between $50,000 and $100,000, and similar if you made under $50,000. But the problem with tax cuts is you get the tax cut, and then you forgot that you got it. And then you have people like Bernie Sanders and others saying these were tax cuts for the rich, and everyone else suffered, which wasn't true. Everyone got a tax cut, but you will notice if the tax cut expires and then you get a brand new big tax bill. So I think Trump has a golden opportunity here because he can just extend his Trump tax cuts and then latch onto that, these new tax cuts. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. So I think the fact that you have these expiring cuts makes it easy to just latch on the others, and that would be real progress. Hey, Republicans may never lose again if you get no tax on tips and no tax on overtime in place.
Do you think there's any chance to eliminate the IRS and get a flat tax across the board?
That may be reaching a little too far. I mean, no, I like the idea. I love it, and you're going to have a lot of innovation with Trump and Vivek. But we'll see. That will be one of the interesting things. Can they accomplish the big, bold changes, or is it going to be more piecemeal? So we'll see, because a lot of this requires congressional input. These first 100 days are key. You never have a bigger mandate than in these first 100 days, and then you're already thinking about midterms, believe it or not, and how the balance of power could change, and then it's harder to get things through. Yeah. So you've got to prioritize, what do you want right out of the gate, and what's the big, bold change?
Do you have any thoughts, not on here, but any thoughts on some of the forced recounts that are happening around the country where it looks like the Democrats are trying to eke out some more victories?
I can't believe what's happening in Pennsylvania. I mean, I was just reading about that on my way here. So you have the highest court in the land in Pennsylvania that said in the weeks before the election that we cannot count ballots that are missing a date or that were misdated. This was a ruling of the high court, which I believe is more Democrat than Republican in Pennsylvania, so it's a more left-leaning court. They made this ruling, and yet 4 counties in Pennsylvania are trying to buck the Supreme, they're just trying to buck the Supreme Court of their state. They're actively counting ballots they were told not to count. And the New York Times headline is like, in a twist of events, Pennsylvania's recount is happening. Well, the twist is violating the law. Like, even the CNN fact checker said, I'm pretty sure the twist is actually violating the law and not listening to what your own court told you. They're out there openly saying, we're counting ballots the court told us not to count. It is crazy. And they're doing this because Bob Casey is behind 21,000 votes. He's the incumbent to Dave McCormick. They're not going to just find these 21,000 votes. And you're certainly not going to find these votes by bucking the Supreme Court and saying what you're doing out loud. I mean, it may need to go back to the Supreme Court, but that is unbelievable. It's preposterous from the party that respects the count in elections. Well, now you're counting unconstitutional votes that your own court, which is Democrat.
Today, President Biden approved Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles against Russia. What does this mean for America and a possible global conflict?
Ukraine, it's interesting to look at because I think you're going to see President Trump getting a deal with some kind of deal to end the war. I don't know when that will come. I don't know how quickly it will come. But Russia intimated publicly that they're ready to talk to the U.S. So how amazing would it be if you see Trump end a war that began on the watch of Joe Biden, right? You might see that happen. And then when you look at the Middle East, it's funny when you look, there were like 11 things that happened after Trump became president in the first week. And one of those things was like the Taliban wanting a new chapter. So the Taliban wants a new chapter, and Qatar's getting Hamas out, and Russia wants to talk. And all it took was Trump winning. I mean, he's not even there yet. He hasn't even been inaugurated. But the world's on notice. The Taliban's on notice. I don't think October 7th would have happened on President Trump's watch. I really do not. I think he was respected, revered, and feared in the Middle East. In fact, I heard from one of his advisors, he got on the phone with the head of the Taliban, a guy named Baradar, and he said in no uncertain terms, he sent him a satellite photo of his house and said, the guy said, why are you doing this? He said, because I know where you live, and if you harm the head on an American soldier, I will blow you into oblivion. And in his final year, there were no hostile deaths in, I believe it was Afghanistan. So they listened. The Taliban listened. And I think with Trump, you will see the end to the Ukraine war, and you will also see, at the end of the day, a normalization of relations, a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, which would be a game changer. Talk about icing Iran out of the Middle East. Well, you do that by getting a Saudi Arabian peace deal, and I think Trump will get that.
So I think you just answered the question, which conflict should Trump address first?
Look, I think this is someone who could do two things at once. He could do two things at once. I think he'll be addressing both, and he's got a highly skilled team around him to do that. I'm hoping Jared Kushner, I know he's in the private sector now, but I'm hoping in some capacity he could be like a Middle East envoy, because that man, along with a guy named Avi Berkowitz, who ironically, we went to Harvard Law School together. We graduated the exact same year. We both went to work in the administration. He's incredible. He's smart. They got 4 Middle East peace deals, and that was a huge development. We hadn't had a Middle East peace deal in decades, so I'm hopeful you'll see Jared Kushner somewhere in there. Because if you start seeing Jared Kushner involved, I'm pretty sure you're going to get that Saudi deal pretty quickly.
So the Abraham Accords will be back on?
Yes, awesome. And added to that. So,
yeah.
Yes.
So Kayleigh, I just want to thank you on behalf of the congregation for coming again to be with us. And I meant what I said earlier, that just knowing, when you think about it, I came to this country and Walter Cronkite was the trusted news figure, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knew where he was spiritually. Nobody particularly cared probably, but the knowledge we have of the people visible in this nation, both in the media and in government, who are overtly Christian and hold to the Word of God, is so encouraging, particularly for folks like us in the blue state of Washington. Yes. So thank you for coming.
Thank
God
you so
bless
much.
you and your family.
I'm honored. Thank you.